Hey there, this is going to be a full user guide for the Tascam XLR unit. So specifically, I'm going to show you how this works with the Canon R5C, but I'm going to talk about how to use it with any camera using the included 3.5mm setup. So first of all, why would you want to use or own the Tascam XLR unit? Well, first of all, cameras like the R5C and all the Canon mirrorless cameras don't have XLR inputs. And a lot of times it's really nice to have them. And so if before you get something like this, you'd have to upgrade to cameras like the C70, C300 Mark III, C500 Mark II, or any of their, more expensive cinema cameras. So with this, you can get professional audio into cameras like the R5C and also other Canon mirrorless cameras. So why would you want something like this? Why would you want XLR inputs? Well, first of all, you get a lot more options for audio inputs, and a lot of them are more professional. Also, they're just a lot of fun. So if you want to use cool microphones like the Shure SM7B or other shotgun microphones, different kinds of wireless lav options, you have a lot more flexibility and usability with something like this. Also with XLR cables, you can run them much further than 3.5. So a lot more professional audio solutions. Now, what I love about this is getting the audio directly into the camera. This is great for a few things. First of all, it just completely simplifies your workflow. When you're on set somewhere, or if you're doing an interview or anything like that, you don't need to bring a separate audio recording device to manage and deal with and have batteries for and all that stuff. And then you have to sync it in post, making cuts and all that stuff. So it's really nice having it going right into the camera. Also, when you are live streaming, I highly recommend that you get the audio directly into the camera to reduce any syncing issues. So if you are using something like a Rodecaster Pro or any other audio USB device, then what happens is the audio goes into your computer and the video goes into your computer from your camera separately, and the streaming software tries to mix them together, and there's often a syncing issue. So when you put the audio into the camera through something like this, then they mix together the audio and the video and they go over HDMI together. You have no syncing issues. For me personally, I always try to get the audio directly in the camera, especially in my YouTube studio here, because if I'm recording talking head like this, or if I am live streaming, it's the same setup. It works exactly the same way. I don't have to change things around. So I really do like having professional audio solutions in my camera. All right, so this is the Tascam CA-XLR2D. This one is made for Canon. They also make one for Fuji, and they also make a generic one for 3.5mm inputs on cameras. But if you buy this, it comes with the 3.5 setup. So I will show you how all that works. In terms of Canon, this works natively with the Canon R3, R5C, R6 Mark II, and the R7. It will work with the R8, the R10, and the R50, but for those three cameras, you need to add external power in the source of AA batteries, and I'll show you how that works. So let's take a look at what comes with this unit. You get the unit itself, which I'll go through in depth. We have the AA battery Sled, which I will show you how this works in a little bit. It also comes with a 3.5mm cable, and it also comes with this, which is the cold shoe adapter for when you are hooking this up to a non-Canon camera. All right, so let me give you a tour around the unit and show you where everything is and how it works. So this side here has all of the controls on it, and there's this little clear plastic door to cover up the controls to keep them from getting bumped. Onto the top, we have a cold shoe mount, really handy for mounting things like lav packs or other stuff. We have a microphone holder here, which I actually really like this holder because the one thing that's nice about it, it has these little rubber holders here that have basically a built-in spacer, so you can use normal size microphones in here. Unlike the Sony FX30, FX3 top handle or the XLR K3M, you have to buy extra spacers. This already has it built in for normal size microphones, and it does have a nice little shock mount on it. Onto this side here, if you don't want the microphone holder, you can unscrew it here and take this off and remove it. You have a couple different audio inputs here. We have the input 3, which is a 3.5mm jack, which is a stereo jack. And then we also have two inputs here that are combo units. These are XLR, so you can plug in XLR, or you can plug in a 1/4-inch mono into the center. So if you want to be able to plug in an instrument or something like that in there, you can do that too. So you have those combo jacks. You also have this little cord organizer thing here too. Okay, on to the back, we have a couple things to talk about here. We have this camera to headphone output switch. So basically you want to leave this on headphones if you want to plug in your headphones here while you're monitoring the audio, and then you have volume controls for your headphones. Now, if you are connecting this not to a Canon camera and using the 3.5 option, which I will talk about later, you want to set this over to camera, and that'll send out the proper signal over this jack, because this is where you'll plug this into your camera. So for most of the time, you want to leave it on headphones if you want to monitor your headphone audio through this port here. Onto the bottom, we have a couple things to talk about. First of all, we have our connection to our camera. I have a little cover on it, which is what comes with it. There's a lot of real fragile connectors here, so I really recommend that if you're not using this, that you make sure you keep the little cover on there to make sure that it doesn't get damaged. You have a flap here, and if you remove this, it just pops off. We have access to the connections for the battery sled, and the little electronic connections are right in there. This here is a USB port. You cannot run power into this. This will not power the device. This is only for firmware updates, so you want to keep that in mind. And I will show you how the battery sled slides on here a little bit later. This right here is the button to release the battery sled. So let me just put this back on. And again, if you're not using this, make sure you keep the cover on it. All right, so now that you got a quick tour around the device, let's talk about the controls and how they all work. So first of all, let's lift up this little flap here. This is really nice because it protects all the switches and stuff when you're running. And it's really nice because when it's down, you can still operate the volume controls or the gain controls right here. So that's kind of cool. So let's get this up and out of the way and let's get into it. So the power supply LED indicators here will tell you where the power is coming from. So if you have it hooked up to the camera and it's working properly, the LED next to the camera icon will light up. If you're using the AA battery power, then the battery icon or battery LED will show up. Now, the other things to decide on are the inputs here. And so you can either have input 1 plus 2, or input 3. This is a 2-channel audio device, so keep that in mind. This will only send 2 channels of audio into your camera. So you have to decide on which is input 1 and which is input 2. So if you just have one input going into input 1 on the other side, let's say you have one XLR microphone, for example, and you set this to input 1, what'll happen is that will send it over to input 1 and input 2. So one input coming in, so one microphone will go to both channels of audio. So that's what the first switch says. If you want to link them or not link them is your next decision. So if you have them linked or this switch turned to on, basically both channels will be running off that single microphone input, input 1 on the other side, and the gain or the volume control will be taken care of with this first dial. So this is really handy if you want to have both channels going into the camera be the same level from the same microphone. So that's where you set that to linked. Now, when would you want it turned off? The reason why you might want to have it turned off is to set up a safety track. So for example, if you're running one microphone and you set the gain properly with the first input, and then you set the second gain a little bit lower, what'll happen then is if someone laughs or just speaks very loudly or there's a loud sound, you have what's called a safety track or something that's lower in volume so that you can prevent clipping and you can pull off that if you need to. So that's kind of the advantage of the linked on and off. Now, if you push this up to the second selection here, input 1 and 2, that'll allow you to have separate controls for the 2 inputs coming in. So if you have 2 microphones coming in or 2 audio sources, input 1 will go to input 1, input 2 will go to input 2. So that's how you do that. And then lastly, you have the input 3, and that is the 3.5 mil jack on the other side. And what that'll do is it'll send the left side of the stereo input of the 3.5 mil jack will go to input 1, and the right side of the 3.5 mil jack will go to input 2. But the only way that you can control this is with the input 1 control knob. You can't control the volumes separately. Okay, so the next thing is to talk about each of the different inputs. Now, for each of the different inputs, you do have this little OL, that's an overload LED. You have those for both of those in case you need to, in case something happens. But in terms of the inputs, you have 3 different options. So we have line, if you have a line level signal coming in, which is really handy, mic, or plus 48 volt phantom power. So depending on the microphone that you're using, you want to select different things. Often you're using, a shotgun microphone or a condenser microphone or whatever. You want to set that to plus 48 volts. If you're running something like an SM7B, which is a dynamic microphone, then you do not need to turn the 48 volt on. So only turn that on if you're using a microphone that needs phantom power. If you are running something like a cloud lifter, then it will need phantom power. So you will have to figure that out depending on what's going on. Now, one thing I do want to mention about the line level and why this is so important on this device is the R5C does not have a way to turn line level on. You can't send a line level signal into this. It doesn't have the proper gain staging. So if you're running line level audio into your camera, this is why a good reason why you would need the Tascam unit. So in the past, when I had used the R5C in my studio, and I'm running a channel strip right now that is sending audio into my camera, this is the way it could do it and get a clean signal. So if you're using something like that, or a Mix-Pre 3 or any other preamp that you're sending the audio from into your camera, you want to have a line input, so that's really handy. Anyways, getting on to the other controls here. So there's attenuation. Attenuation attenuates or lowers the gain of the signal coming in. Now, most of the time we're trying to boost the gain, but if you're in a situation where it's just really loud and you need to lower the gain of the input, like the microphone, you can turn that on. So a higher number will give you more attenuation or reduce the volume. Next is the low cut. And so what this does is it cuts out lower frequencies, or it's known as a high pass filter. So you can set it to off, 80, or 220. So it's really nice. It has that built in. Next, we have the input controls at the bottom. And so you can have it on manual or auto. I always leave it on manual. And then, like I've already been talking about, you control the level with this dial here. And it also has a limiter, so that's really cool. So limiters are really handy if you want to try to avoid clipping. The other thing is over here would be the same thing as the first input control, but it's for input 2. So you have the same things for line mic and phantom power, attenuation, low cut, and the different input options. So now let's get the Tascam unit mounted on the R5C. I'll show you how it works. First of all, let's take off the hot shoe cover. I always keep that on the camera when I'm not using anything in the hot shoe. Keep it nice and clean. And then, of course, take off the cover that we talked about earlier on the Tascam unit. So what we're gonna do here is this is just gonna slide right into the hot shoe of the R5C. Now that we have that in there, there's this little lock that you slide across, and you hear that little click. And when you are done, there's a button you press right here, and then you can undo it. So you undo it and then you can pull it out. So we drop it in till it clicks, and that's how you install it. So now that we have the Tascam unit installed on the R5C, I wanna show you how it works, and we'll hook up some microphones and all that kind of stuff. One thing I wanna mention is if you're trying to do 4-channel audio on the R5C, you need to be recording in the XF AVC codec and not the MP4 codec. So I'm not sure about some of the other Canon mirrorless cameras. I have a feeling you can only do 2-channel audio on them because you're recording an MP4. So if you need 4-channel audio, which I'll talk about in this video, make sure you have it to set to an XF AVC codec in the R5C. Okay, so you can see here that we have it properly hooked up and we're getting power from the camera like I was talking about before. So let's hook up a microphone. I'm gonna hook up the SM7B, which is a super popular microphone. One thing about the SM7B is that it requires a lot of gain. And luckily, the Tascam unit supplies 66 dB of gain, which is enough to drive this microphone. So let me show you how this works. So over here, we have the input set to 1. So input 1 is gonna go to input 1 and input 2, like we talked about earlier, and I have them linked. So we're getting the same audio on both channels. Now, the reason why we're not seeing any audio in channel 1 and channel 2 is that I have this set to line. So let me switch this over to mic. Now, I don't need to have this on 48-volt phantom power because, again, this is a dynamic microphone, so we don't need phantom power. So let me talk into the SM7B here, and I can set the audio level here by adjusting the gain control, and this is adjusting it on both channels. So maybe something like that. So let me hit record. So now you're listening to the SM7B recorded directly into the Tascam unit into the R5C. So hopefully this sounds pretty good. All right, let me move this out of the way. So like I said before, this is sending audio into channel 1 and channel 2, and they're linked. So let me show you the option to unlink them. So if we unlink them and we flip this switch over here down, now they are unlinked. So now you're seeing a different audio level in channel 1 and channel 2. So for example, like I already set the audio level to channel 1. If I turn up channel 2 a little bit, you can see here that channel 2 is less than channel 1. So this creates a safety track. So if I get really loud or something like that, you'll see that you don't have clipping. So it's a really nice option if you're running 1 channel of audio. All right, so let's talk about 2 channels of audio. So right now we have the SM7B going into channel 1. I'm gonna hook up my Sennheiser AVX wireless kit, which I love. I've been using this for years. It's one of my favorite wireless lav setups. And the best thing about it is that it's XLR, so it plugs directly in. So it's really nice. So let me plug this in here to channel 2. And this is the transmitter. So right now, the way I have it set up, SM7B is going into channel 1, AVX is going into channel 2. So let's go and see what's going on in the camera here. So we're gonna have to change the input selection from channel 1 here to 1+2. So now input 1 is going into channel 1, input 2 is going to channel 2. And so now you should have 2 different audio. You can see it is peaking pretty hard on channel 2. So let me turn this down. So now this is the channel 2 audio. This is the lav. This is the lav into channel 2. and we have the SM7B into channel 1, and we can control those two independently. So it's really nice to do this if you are running an interview, for example. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll run a lav on the subject and also an overhead mic, so I have the option to choose one or the other in post. So it's really handy to do that. So that's how you set up 2-channel audio. Like I said before, you can plug a 3.5mm audio source into the Tascam unit as well. Now, if you're just using something like this, a basic shotgun microphone, I would recommend plugging this directly into the camera. It makes things a lot more simple. But why would you want to plug something like this? This is the Sennheiser MKE400 if you're interested. I know this is starting to sound like a Sennheiser commercial, but this video is not sponsored by Sennheiser. These are just the products that I use on a regular basis, and I really love them. So if you were to plug just a microphone in here, you do get a couple of options. You do get the other things going on with the device. You get the attenuation, the low cut, and the limiter options. So those are things that you could get. But the biggest reason I would recommend plugging in a 3.5mm source here is if you're sending it a line level signal. This is something that if you have an audio device that you're trying to input into the R5C, you cannot gain stage the R5C properly with a line level signal unless you have the Tascam unit. So that's what I'd recommend. But if you want to plug in a 3.5 source, like let's plug in this microphone here. We plug it into input 3, and you just want to make sure that you go over here and you put this up to input 3, and now this audio source is going into channels or input 1, input 2, and going into the camera, just like it would be if it was hooked right into the camera. So you do have that option there. All right, so now let's get on talking about 3 and 4 channel audio. And so right now, like we had before, we have the SM7B going to input 1, and we have the AVX going into input 2. So I need to go back to the Tascam unit and change this to input 1 plus 2. So now that we have control, input 1 is the SM7B, input 2 is AVX. We have separate controls for those, and we control the volume and all of their stuff on the Tascam unit. Now, you can see here, if you're looking at the screen on the bottom right, that channels 3 and 4 are also picking up audio. And right now that's defaulting to the internal scratch microphone on the R5C. All right, so let's go into the menu here, and we can go over to the 4th page over, which is the audio section. You can see that the first and second page is all grayed out, and that's because the Tascam unit is taking over all those controls. Now, one thing here is the monaural microphone, and that is turned on right now. And if I back out, you can see in the bottom right, you can see channels 3 and 4 going nuts. That is the internal scratch microphone that's built into the camera. So what we can do is we can actually turn this off. And if we turn this off, now you see there's nothing being picked up in channels 3 and 4. Now, there is no actual audio control for this. I don't know why, but you can't control it. So even if we go over to the 4th page, you can see there is no control for the internal microphone. Now, I did say, so this would be 3-channel audio if we have the internal mic turned on. You have channels 1 and 2 from the Tascam, and channel 3 and 4, which are the same. So basically 3-channel audio. It's really nice to have a backup track. So even if you aren't planning on using that internal microphone and you don't have another mic plugged in, make sure you turn that on. It's really good for syncing and just having a super backup. Doesn't sound very good. Now, let's say we want to plug in audio source into the camera to get channels 3 and 4 from something else other than the internal microphone. So what we need to do here is turn the monaural microphone off, or if you just plug in a device, it will automatically turn it off. So let me show you that. So to get a 3rd and 4th channel that's not going to be the internal mic, let's plug something in. Let's plug in this microphone into the mic input that's actually on the camera, because that'll be the 3rd and 4th channel being recorded in the XFAVC codec. So as I plug in the microphone, you can see that the monaural microphone turns off, and we have a few different options on this page here. We have mic attenuation and mic low cut, which is really nice because those are some of the same features we had in the Tascam unit. Scrolling back to the 1st page, you can see some of the stuff is grayed out now because we have control. So channel 3 and 4 link, that is kind of what we were talking about before, with channel 3 and 4 having either 1 control or 2 control for the gain. So you can either have them linked if you want the same level in both, but let's have them separated for now. Now, when we go over to the 2nd page, we have levels 3 and 4. So that would be like the left and right channels of the microphone going into channels 3 and 4 in the camera. So we can select these to manual if we want to have manual control for each one. And then if we go in here and select like channel 3, for example, this is this microphone here. We can turn the level down to get the proper level. And then maybe we want to make the 4th channel here, or the 2nd channel from that microphone, a little bit lower as a safety track. So you can go ahead and do that, and you have those controls. Now, onto the 4th page over here, this has a couple things to talk about, and this has to do how you're monitoring the audio. So the headphone volume, this is the volume that's coming out of the headphone jack on the camera itself. Does not control the audio that comes out of the Tascam unit. That you do with those buttons like I showed you before. And what you can do here is what channels you want to monitor. So if you plug your headphones into the camera, you can select what you want to monitor. So if you want to do channel 1 and 3 on the left and channel 2 and 4 on the right and so on. And then here you can also select what audio goes over HDMI. So that's really handy to do. You have options there. Now, if you are running a 3rd and 4th channel into the camera, like we're talking about here, and you plug your headphones into the Tascam unit, you only hear channels 1 and 2 that are coming from the Tascam unit. So if you want to hear channel 3 and 4, you have to make sure you plug your headphones into the camera. So as you can see, the Tascam unit opens up a lot of different professional audio solutions and a lot of flexibility into the R5C. Now, if you're using cameras like the R3, the R5C, the R6 Mark II, or the R7, you just pop this right in and the camera will power the Tascam unit. But like I mentioned earlier, if you're using cameras like the R8, the R10, or the R50, you need to supply external power, and you do that with the battery sled, which I mentioned earlier. So this battery sled, it holds 2 AA batteries, which you can put in there, very easy to install. And then on the other side, there's a couple of switches to mention. You have the battery powered switch. So this is basically your power switch. You can turn that on and off. So if you're not going to use it, make sure you turn it off or it will drain the battery. And then you have a switch here to determine what kind of batteries it is, alkaline, lithium, or nickel metal halide. So you have different options depending on what kind of battery you're using. I have it set to alkaline because I'm using regular batteries right now. So let me put this on here and let me also show you how to hook this up for using it with any camera. All right, so before I get the battery sled onto the Tascam unit, I want to mention one thing about installing this, and this was not clear when I got it, so I definitely want to make sure I point this out. This right here is the connector that attaches the battery sled to the Tascam unit. There is this little rubber cover on here. It may not be clearly obvious that you need to remove that before you do this, so make sure you take that off to expose the electronics here to connect to the Tascam unit. Didn't make sense for me at first. I didn't find that, and I couldn't figure out why it wasn't going in. So make sure you take that thing off first. On the XLR unit itself, there's that flap on the bottom, which I showed you earlier. So let's take this off, and then make sure you have the orientation correctly. The little connector here will go in the back here next to the USB port. So all you have to do is pop that in, and it should go in pretty easily. And then when you need this out, you just press the button here, and you can pull out the battery sled. So make sure you push the button in firmly and it should pop right out. So that's how you do that. One thing I kind of glanced over quickly about installing the Tascam unit on your R5C is make sure you put it on the R5C, lock it down, and then turn the camera on. And just the opposite when you're turning it off. So turn the camera off, then pull the XLR unit off the top of the camera. Now, if you're using the R8, the R10, or the R50, there's another order of operations for starting it up. Get the battery sled on there, have it turned off, slide this onto your camera, lock it down, then turn the battery power on, and then turn your camera on. And the reverse when you're turning everything off. That way, when the camera turns on, it sees an active Tascam unit and it knows to connect to it. So if you don't do it in that order, you might have some issues with it getting started. I just want to make sure that you knew about that. So like I said earlier, we can definitely use this as a standalone audio device and use it just like we did before with 2 channels of professional audio and send that signal into a camera using the included 3.5mm cable. Now, there's a couple things you have to do with this. First of all, we're not going to be using a hot shoe, so you have to supply power to this unit, so you can do that with the battery sled like we did before for the R8, the R10, and the R50. So just like before, put batteries in there, install the sled. And the other thing we need to do is swap out the base of the Tascam unit. So what it does come with is an extra base, which is a dummy cold shoe. So there's no electrical connectors here. There's no power. There's none of that. It's just a metal cold shoe. You can install this on a hot shoe or probably a cage or something like that. It doesn't need to be, in there. I'd probably recommend installing it on a cage because it's going to be kind of heavy and stuff. And I don't like putting extra support on the hot shoe of a camera. And so this is important because if you don't swap this out, it will not work properly. And I thought that if you just had the battery sled installed and you hook up everything, it should work like just sitting on a table, but you have to actually swap out the bases to make it work. So let me show you how to do that. So first of all, this guy here does come with a little cover like the other one did to cover up the connector here. So make sure you take that off first or it won't fit in there. And then on the bottom here, there are a screw on each side, which you have to take out to swap this out. Now, when you first get it, the screws might be rather tight, so make sure you're very, very careful on getting them out so that you don't strip the screws, because that would be a big time problem. So make sure you get these guys out all the way. And then we're gonna swap this out. One thing is keep in mind the orientation. There are these two little tabs here or pins or whatever that fit into the holes here. So make sure you get it in the right way. And then you can install these screws into this unit. One thing I have to say with swapping this over and doing this was that I would not recommend doing this over and over and over again. You're probably going to screw up the screws after a while. So I would really decide how you're going to use this unit and probably not do this too often, but you do have the option to do this, and I just wanted to demonstrate this for all of you guys. So let's get the other screw in here. And make sure you don't strip the screws out. So we'll get this installed, and it's pretty easy to do. It only takes, I mean, you're watching me do it, it doesn't take that long to do. And now you have the cold shoe on there. The next thing, like I said before, is you want to make sure that you get the battery sled installed. And now when we go over here and we flip the power on, you will see that we have the battery supplied with the LED here. And then on the back, you want to make sure you set this to camera, because that will give you the output that you're looking for from the device. You plug the 3.5 into here, you plug this 3.5 into your camera, and you make sure you set the audio properly on the camera like you would do with any microphone. So that's how you hook this up to an external device. And, you know, I think it gives a little bit more flexibility to this device, especially if you wind up selling your Canon cameras or you just want to use this on a different camera, you have the option. So now you've seen how to connect and set up the Tascam unit to a variety of cameras and a bunch of different situations. I want to talk about a couple of other configurations here. So like I said earlier, if I'm doing a formal interview, I'll often run a lav mic to the subject, and then I'll have an overhead boom mic or shotgun mic that I'll send it to another channel so that I have backups, and then later I can determine which one sounds better. So it's really nice to have redundant recording with different kinds of situations. Now, I haven't done a lot of this lately, but I have done a lot of sort of run and gun style documentary work. And when I would do that, I would set it up like this on camera like this, or like the FX3. I would have my Sennheiser AVX into one channel, and that would be a lav on the subject. And then I'd run a shotgun mic in addition to that to pick up ambient sounds and run as a backup as well. And it's really nice because I can just, on this side of it, I can just adjust the audio controls really easily, and I can have headphones plugged in. And I can also run another lav or two more lavs into the camera, like I said, with third and fourth audio tracks. So you have a lot of flexibility. Now, a lot of people ask me for microphone recommendations and stuff like that. I'm not an audio expert whatsoever, but I've been lately, like I said earlier, using a lot of Sennheiser products. They've never paid me anything. They never sponsored the channel. They did send me a few items to test out, one of which is this MKE600, and I really do like this microphone. So if you're looking for a pretty solid shotgun microphone that you can use in a lot of different situations, I recommend this. So one thing is it is very, very long, so you just have to keep that in mind, but really nice microphone. So this is a really nice run and gun setup, and I think another thing that makes it work really well is a short audio cable like this. So I'll leave links down in the description for all the gear that I'm talking about, but this is pretty nice. And one thing, like I mentioned before, is you don't need any extra spacers with this device because they're already built in, unlike the Sony units. Now, I do want to take a moment to talk about the reliability of the Tascam unit. I personally have not had any issues with my Tascam unit, but I'm generally very careful with it, and I've mainly been using it around my studio. But I don't want to discredit all the people that have had issues with this and have reported them, because I know there's a lot of people who have had issues and they've stopped working. So I do want to mention that. Now, I did read the manual before preparing for this video, and there are some things in there that I've already talked about and some other things you might want to consider to make sure that you're keeping these things running as long as possible. So first of all, don't connect or disconnect mics when it's set to 48 volt phantom power, because this could damage the unit. Turn the camera power off when connecting or disconnecting the unit with the camera. This thing is not waterproof, so make sure you're careful about dust and moisture. And lastly, when you're transporting the unit, make sure you take it off the camera and protect it with the little covers and caps like I mentioned earlier on. I think if you keep all that in mind and you're kind of careful about it, hopefully it will last a while. But like I said, I've heard of plenty of people having issues with theirs. Overall, it's a really cool unit, and it offers a lot of flexibility and power to mirrorless cameras, and the R5C in particular as a mirrorless hybrid cinema camera. So anyways, hopefully this gets you started. If you, like I said, are interested in any of the gear they mentioned, I'll leave links down below. I appreciate you watching. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this, hit subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.